perception is that there have been a few who suggested that we should put large numbers of U.S. troops on the ground. It is not just my view, but the view of my closest military and civilian advisors that that would be a mistake.
President Obama at the G20 summit earlier today talking about American reaction to Friday's terror attacks in Paris. Obviously, we have a President Obama today, but the question so often comes up in times like these, what would President Reagan do? Moreover, what should Washington be doing in the here and now? For more, let's welcome in former Congressman Bob Walker from his Washington, D.C. office. Bob is now a senior advisor for John Kasich's presidential campaign. We're also pleased to be joined by presidential historian Craig Shirley. He's the author of several books on Ronald Reagan, including his latest, Last Act, The Final Years and Emerging Legacy of Ronald Reagan. Gentlemen, we really appreciate your time here on Newsmax Prime. Craig, we always come back to this because the times are so tough. Confronting the situation we do now, what would Reagan do?
Well, JD, he wouldn't be doing what Barack Obama is doing, and that is telling the enemy what he won't be doing. He left, Reagan, when it came to most affairs, was very good at holding his cards close to his vest and not letting his political opponents or military enemies knowing what was on his mind. He often struck, without warning and from anywhere, as he did against Libya in 1986 after they bombed the discotheque in West Germany. He bombed Tripoli, but it came without warning. The Achille Lauro, when the cruise ship was attacked by terrorists, he then picked up the terrorists there without any warning or a forethought. So one thing Reagan would have done is not telegraph his next move to his enemies.
Bob Walker, when you see President Obama at the G20 summit spending almost an hour talking about our national security policy, I know people want to be informed, but should he do a little less Hamlet-esque reasoning in public?
Well, I think he should, and I'm sorry to say, but when I listened to the president's news conference today, I found him delusional when he starts talking about the fact that the goal should be to contain the ISIS terrorists rather than destroy them. That, to me, represents a policy that is simply unworkable and I don't think can be sustained in American policy circles.
Well, it's more than just policy discussions, Bob. I mean, we're hearing the new ISIS video is out threatening Washington, D.C. If the nation's capital is now in the crosshairs, what can Congress do to beef up our security if the president just wants to think about it?
Well, one of the things we ought to do is make certain that we aren't approaching these things from a standpoint of weakness. It disturbs me, for example, that the aircraft carrier, I think it's the Theodore Roosevelt, is moving out of the Mediterranean as we speak, and we will not have a presence there. Instead, there's a French carrier moving into the Mediterranean. That's not the kind of position that inspires people to believe that we are trying to approach these matters from a position of strength.
Craig Shirley, do you believe this administration is taking the ISIS warning seriously enough?
Bill Buckley, when he was still alive, I interviewed him about Jimmy Carter versus Ronald Reagan. And he told me he thought Jimmy Carter was lost in power, meaning he didn't understand the American presidency. I would apply the same label to Barack Obama. I think he's lost in power. I don't think he understands the presidency. He doesn't understand the Constitution. He doesn't understand the role of the U.S. government, the United States government, which is to defend the peace and freedom and security of the American people. He doesn't understand that you cannot, it's like Adolf Hitler being contained. No, there's only a way to deal with Adolf Hitler, and that's destroy him. The Empire of Japan, FDR didn't say we're going to contain the Empire of Japan. He said, no, we're going to destroy the Empire of Japan. FDR was sure-footed as far as, at least as far as foreign policy and conducting military warfare, as was Ronald Reagan. This president is, quite frankly, is lost in power.
Well, there are a lot of folks who seek to get that power, and for purposes of full disclosure, Bob Walker is advising our old congressional colleague John Kasich. Front and center right now, Bob, the whole question of Syrian refugees coming to America. Donald Trump initially said he was okay with that. Since then, he's doubled back, saying, no, wait a minute, bringing in those Syrian refugees would be the ultimate Trojan horse. Are we going to see a lot of presidential candidates rethink the whole question of borders and immigration and refugees?
Well, I mean, from the standpoint of our campaign, we've said that border security is the #1 goal that has to be taken. And you'll notice that John Kasich announced today that Ohio would not accept the Syrian refugees into it. So, yes, this becomes a major source of comment at the present time. And it seems to me that the American people are going to want a candidate that has strong national security background. And there are only a handful of people in the race who can say that they have that.
Craig Shirley, Donald Trump and others speak out. They don't seem to be lost in power. They seem to be certain about it. Can his evolving on this issue, would his earlier statement possibly hurt him with voters?
No, if he evolves and adopts a new position, says I was mistaken previously, this is where I am now, then I think he'll be fine. It's when politicians change positions or flip-flop and then they don't explain their previous position. But if he's able to change the terms of the debate and focus attention on his new position, which is against allowing Syrian refugees in the United States, and he does so strongly and with vehemence, then he'll probably be fine.
To be continued, obviously, this presidential campaign, and we hope not to see any further ISIS attacks, but that is something we will keep our eye on as well. Craig Shirley, Bob Walker, gentlemen, you have our thanks. Coming up next, Dick Morris tries to make the case for American boots on the ground in the wake of the Paris attacks. Will any presidential candidates take his advice? We'll talk about it.